Good morning. Welcome back to my channel. Happy holidays if you celebrate Christmas or anything like that. Hope you're taking it easy, and also Happy New Year's if you're listening to this in the New Year's. I want to be talking about the Toronto Raptors, mostly focusing on their offense and their lack of ability to run a high-level offense. And why I think that's the case, I think it's pretty much for two pretty obvious reasons. So let's get into it. The first reason I think why we can't run an elite offense, especially an elite pick and roll offense, is because we don't have any pull-up threats. I think to run an elite offense, you need someone who can either be an elite rim finisher or be a pull-up threat option in the pick and roll. And when you're looking at this roster, especially in a guard rotation, we don't have that. Gary Trent Jr. and Fred VanVleet only shoot 34% on pull-up threes over the last 3 seasons, which isn't good enough to be an elite option in the pick and roll and really make teams fight over those screens because they know they don't really need to. If you were shooting at 37 or 38%, that would be a lot more impactful and make teams really adjust to that. But because they're not those types of shooters, teams don't really need to adjust in the same way that they would have to for other guys. And because Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. are also not elite rim finishers, they can't put pressure on the defense and collapse the defense in that way. So it really limits the option when we're running pick and roll as those guys as ball handler, because really all we can do is try to get a tough mid-range or get the roll man going. And when you're looking at that, when you're looking at giving the playmaking skills, Fred VanVleet is a good playmaker, not a great one, and he's just too small. So it's like if someone goes over the screen, he gets a little bit of dribble penetration, the big steps up, they kind of do a little trap around the free throw line. He doesn't have the ability or the skill to get that pass to the open big man, to the open roll man. And Gary Trent Jr. also just doesn't really have those playmaking chops. But let's say, okay, Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam run pick and roll. Fred's defender fights over it. Fred's the roll man kind of steps up a little bit to hedge a bit on the screen, trapping Fred. If Fred then hits Pascal Siakam as a roll man, which I don't really think he does very often because he can't see over the big, he can't see over the double there because he's so small. Even if he does hit Pascal Siakam, 80% of the time, teams know that they can help off whoever is in the corner because it's either Juancho, Scotty, Thad, Chris Boucher, who are all below 30% shooters or 34% shooters and below from three. So they're helping off of that guy, and then it's boom. Even if we do get the roll man, Pascal with the ball, and they kick it out, it's a brick three, and then it doesn't matter. And then, okay, let's look at it from kind of the other side, whereas let's look at a roll man. I really don't think we have that many good roll men either because none of those guys can pop at a high level, and none of them have great size or strength. Like Juancho, I don't think is a good roll man. Thad is okay, but he's too old to be that affected. Chris Boucher just doesn't have the size. Coloco's too young. He doesn't have the size. OG's good, but I still don't think he's an elite screener, and he doesn't really have that great of a rim package finishing in those senses. Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam are also really good at screeners, but I would rather them be the ball handlers for us in the pick and roll because I think those are our best ball handlers and give us the most options in the pick and roll when they're running it. And just some numbers to support this. For ball handling, we rank last in the league for points per possession at 0.67, if I remember correctly, according to Basketball Index. And for pick and roll, roll man scoring points per possession, we also rank dead last with the Houston Rockets, unfortunately, for 0.69 points per possession. And we just, that's unacceptable. It's the best and easiest play in the game. Every single team who has a good offense runs it at a very high level. And we, one, don't really run it that often. And two, when we do run it, we're not very good at it because we don't have the right pieces for it. We have a lot of guys who are very, very good in certain spots and roles. But when you build the whole team around those types of guys who are niche players here and there, you don't have a cohesive unit. I think we're seeing that on the offensive end where people don't have a real defined role, with Scotty thinking he can be a more playmaker, not being aggressive enough, OG doing a lot more self-creation, Fred VanVleet still doing a lot more self-creation than I would like. We don't have organization on the offensive end, and because of that, it leads to so many defensive struggles, like everyone keeps saying, because it's like, you get an open three, you miss. Now you got to run all the way from back from the paint and the three-point line to defend, and you're doing that 100 times a game. You're going to be tired, and that's what we're seeing. I think we're seeing this with Pascal's offensive game, especially more late down the stretches. Shots seem a lot more short and just kind of like they don't have enough on it, like his legs are tired, which makes sense because especially the offensive load and defensive load he's carrying, it makes sense. But yeah, it's just kind of worrisome because I don't understand really what changed from last year to this year. I think teams are just now more aware that we can't shoot I think our shooters also aren't playing as good, so that's really hurting. Um, and two, I think this does speak to the lack of like Nick Nurse's offensive scheme. I think he's starting to realize he needs to run a lot more plays. I'm seeing him run more plays, but I still want him to do it at a more high frequent level. I just don't really know if that's the type of offensive coach he is, but I think he really needs to make adjustments for his system because the way things are working, it just looks terrible. Uh, and two, I think like another kind of compiling factor about everything here is that we're such a bad shooting team outside of OG, Fred VanVleet, and Gary Trent Jr. No one shoots above 34% over the last 3 years besides those three guys. And in today's league, you just can't really play that way, unfortunately. We can get all the turnovers, we can get all the offensive rebounds, we can do all of that little stuff on the margins, but if we have the worst half-court offense, the worst pick-and-roll offense, and the worst shooting talent in the league, it doesn't matter. It really, really doesn't matter. I suggested a trade not that long ago, which I think some people were like, I think that's way too much. And it was like a second and salary filler for Mikal Beasley. But looking at this team right now, I really think that man would fix a lot of our problems because it's a good shooter in the catch and shoot. He's a decent pull-up shooter. I think he shoots 36% on pull-up threes over the last 3 seasons. I don't think he's an elite ball handler, but he does have better size. And I think, too, like we can run Pascal, OG, Scotty, and then, like, Gary Trent Jr. and Mikal Beasley, I think, as our 2 guards, and let them be just more spacers and shooters who run pick and roll very occasionally just to get their own shot off. And I think that type of offensive system could work. I'm not saying the vision of having like your main 2 guys as your main 2 ball handlers be wings doesn't work. I think it can work at a high level. I think you're seeing that in Boston, in New Orleans. You have a lot of examples of those types of teams where they have a lot of more front court ball handling skills and they're elite offenses, but the thing that makes all those teams work is that they've surrounded those elite wing players with elite shooters. I don't know if we can do that. I know we brought in Otto Porter Jr. to kind of be that type of shooter, but he hasn't played, and I don't know why we thought he would going to play. This is a guy who's always injured. He's injured again. What a surprise. But yeah, like, I don't know. I just think this team right now needs a lot more help. It needs some offensive juice. I think Nick Nurse needs to understand that, like, you need to sacrifice some defensive players for offensive players. I really like how he put what's his name? Downton Jr. in yesterday. I like his energy. I think he's really good. And I think especially if this team's going to be struggling, put those guys out there, man. Let's see what we got in them. I think Downton Jr. could be a solid rotational piece for sure eventually. And yeah, I mean, everyone's being like, I don't think Masai's going to make moves. I don't think this is going to happen, blah, 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 blah. I'm not claiming to know anything or make an opinion or make a statement about those things. I'm just talking about how I feel about this team. I think there's clear problems with it on the offensive end, as we just went over with their pick and roll offense. I think that's the biggest problem with this team. And when you have a terrible offense, your defense is going to hurt. We hear that all the time. You know, you're going to give teams transition. You don't have as many opportunities to get set after a make bucket. And then you get run off the court after a while because it's tiring, and especially if you have to put so much more effort in the offensive end just to get one bucket. It's going to be really demoralizing. I think we're seeing that with this team. Just talking about a couple other games last night that I watched. The Indiana Pacers versus Cleveland Cavaliers game was amazing. Tyrese Haliburton is him. Tyrese Haliburton is absolutely him. I could really do see him being a top 5 point guard in the league eventually. He's going to have really stiff competition to compete with like guys like Luka, Ja, Shea, Trey. But I really do think he's right in that echelon. I think we need to start talking about him as one of those amazing young prospects who could really be something special. Like, only in his 3rd year, and he's averaging 20 and 10 on great efficiency. I know the defense isn't amazing, but I think it's okay, and he's shown that he cares about that end. And with his high intelligence on the offensive end, I can definitely see him improving very heavily on the defensive end of the ball. So that's just really promising. Guys, him hit a nice game winner last night or a couple nights ago. Luka Doncic, also just amazing. And yeah, I think just the young talent in this league is pretty incredible, and I think we're going to be really spoiled with the amount of, like, potential old-time greats that we're getting to watch right now, even looking at some of the older guys like Jokic, Giannis, and Embiid, all setting records and all redefining what big men can be. I think Jokic has a case for being the best offensive center, peak for peak, ever. I went over this in the offseason with my friend on our podcast, just kind of going over guys like Kareem, Bill Russell, Will Chamberlain, Karl Malone, Dirk. And I really do think Jokic, when you're looking at the last 2 seasons, has a case for being in that category, if not even going a step higher and being in the top kind of 10 all-time offensive players. The playmaking, the efficiency, the rebounding is just otherworldly. And I think we're being really fucking spoiled getting to watch all these all-time fucking greats go right now. And I think it's just a really fun time to be a basketball fan. So, yeah, thank you for watching. Sorry for kind of rambling at the end. Take it easy.